right, Jim, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today and a bit about McNellie's?
Yep. So I'm Jim O'Connor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the McNellie's Group. We're based in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have 16 brands in 25 locations. I joined the company in 2008, and at that time we had 3 brands, and probably 100 employees. Now, as I said, we have 25 brands, soon to be 26. I'm sorry, 16 brands, soon to be 17, with 25 locations, soon to be 26, and over 1,000 employees. So a lot has changed in the 15 years since I've been with the company. Most of our restaurants are in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but we do have 4 in Oklahoma City and 2 in Little Rock.
Arkansas, yeah.
So, but our primary footprint really is in the Tulsa market, which is Tulsa is the second largest city in Oklahoma. It's in northeastern Oklahoma. As I was explaining to you, it's 4 hours south of Kansas City, 4 hours north of Dallas, and about 90 miles northeast of Oklahoma City. So in my role, I kind of oversee a little bit of everything. As the company's gotten bigger, I spend a lot of my time on the business operations.
Yeah.
Let's go on the restaurant operations, just because as we've grown, there are just so many aspects of the business that we have to be aware of. So in my role, I oversee human resources, marketing. We have a 401k plan that takes up a lot of my time. We're doing our health insurance renewal. That's a big part of what I do. I also oversee all the insurance. So as you can imagine, when we have all these locations, insurance becomes a big part of what I have to be involved in. And that's gotten increasingly complicated over the years. It seems like every year there is an additional thing to be concerned about. A couple of years ago, cybersecurity was the big one. Making sure you have appropriate coverage on your cybersecurity, and then it was terrorism insurance. Most recently, there's trying to have mass shooting insurance.
Oh wow!
It's something that never thought in a million years you'd have to contemplate having mass shooting insurance, but that is something that is now available to operate. So you begin to say, okay, how much effort on the insurance side? It's always making sure, do we have the appropriate coverage? Are we underinsured, overinsured? So that can be complicated. And right now, a big area for us is COVID's clearly, it's kind of in the rear window, but we're still dealing with a lot of the stuff that came from that. Any operator is, I'm sure, struggling with the inflation. That's been a challenge for anyone in this industry, and trying to figure out where we can take price increases. We can't just do what we're doing in 21 and 22 and kind of raising prices as quickly as keep up with our increasing costs. So I think that's become a bigger challenge for operators, is making sure when you have to raise prices, that you do it in a way where you're not going to annoy customers, because I think now they're becoming much more aware of how much prices have increased.
Yeah.
So that's a huge challenge for us, is to make sure we're not getting out of line, but we're covering keeping our margins without getting without making the customers too sensitive.
Totally. And it's interesting, the COVID rebound has just been kind of like one enormous challenge for every operator. Like I was saying to you, before we came on, I think I've done this 80 times now, this podcast, and it's a lot of COOs like yourself, directors of operations, and everyone's kind of coming to terms with the myriad of different kind of blows, so to speak, that COVID, the rebound of COVID has done, which obviously inflation of food, but it's the personnel questions of people coming back, finding GMs. I feel like I hear GMs is a huge thing as well constantly.
Right.
But it seems like it would in sort of the hierarchy of sort of challenges that you've been presenting there in terms of inflation, insurance.
Yeah.
There wasn't actually a personnel kind of challenge there, which is kind of interesting. Obviously it is a challenge, but
Spring of 21 was definitely the most challenging in terms of personnel. We had several times where we struggled to open locations because we were so short-staffed.
Yeah.
And that was a combination of people who had left the industry and people who were unavailable to work because they were sick. that's rebounded for us. I mean, it's always been a difficult industry in terms of hiring. You never have as many good people as you want. But our core, in terms of our management team and a lot of our backup house, has remained pretty intact.
That's
It's
great.
that part that's constantly changing, that, you know, some of the front of house employees, we've had more turnover.
Yeah.
But I think we have a good reputation within our community about treating our employees fairly, try to do as much as possible to create the best, you know, customer service industry job in our
Yeah.
markets. So in line with that, we offer health insurance to all of our salaried employees and all of our hourly employees who work
Yeah.
30 hours in a month. I'm sorry, average working more than 30 hours can get on our insurance plan too, and we'll cover 50% of it. So that has been, I think, something that has been popular with potential employees, and obviously our existing employees, to knowing that that health insurance is accessible. That's
Yeah.
not the case in this industry. And I'm sure you have a perspective, you know, being from Ireland and now in the States, how health insurance is really important to have in this
Yeah.
country, because if something goes wrong, it can be catastrophic.
Totally. And I mean, like to your point there as well about like, you know, you offering health insurance, and you spoke about 401ks as the very first thing you mentioned as well earlier when we just started. Like, are these kind of relatively like modern post-COVID benefits, or were you like offering these before to like hourly staff as well?
Those were both available pre-COVID.
Yeah. Amazing.
The thing that we've actually offered post-COVID, in addition to the 401k, the access to health insurance, dental insurance, we started partnering with BetterHelp to do counseling.
Yeah.
So we had heard from a number of employees who were, you know, during COVID and you know, immediately after was really challenging for people. There were a lot of stresses in their lives. You know, work was stressful because you know, customers could be strange during that time. So there were a lot of stresses at work and at home. So we had heard from customers, from employees who said, was there access to any kind of mental health service? And so we partnered with BetterHelp. The thought on that was a lot of, especially for some of our younger employees, the ability to do it via text or via FaceTime or via phone call was probably, they were more amenable to that.
Yeah.
Than going into a traditional office kind of setting to do face-to-face counseling. So we've had that now for 2 years, and we have a fair number of employees who are taking advantage of that. So that was us like an additional benefit that we think, and it's not only good for us as the employers, but good for our employees, knowing that our industry is a really stressful industry.
Totally.
People outside of it don't know how hard it can be when you're working those long hours. And, you know, customers have very high expectations, and they can get annoyed quickly if things aren't exactly how they want them to be. So I think it's been good to have that available to them. But, you know, our big thing is, you know, that health insurance is, you know, one of our biggest differentiators, and it's not inexpensive. And we're going through our renewal right now. It's you know, the premiums are rising at an unbelievable rate.
Yeah.
So that puts additional pressure on us to make sure we're, you know, as on top of all the stuff in the restaurants as possible, because our margins, as anyone will tell you, have been compressed dramatically. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest challenges post-COVID, now that things were it's settled down and the commodities have kind of normalized. There's still so much pressure on our margins. And because historically you'd have issues with a few items, you know, beef would be going up, avocado would go crazy, or limes. A couple of years ago, limes like quadrupled in a couple of months. So you'd be aware that, like, hey, keep an eye on these particular products. But now it's so pervasive. So many things have increased. So our to-go costs are really, I think they've doubled or tripled since COVID. We don't do a lot of to-go. That's not a big part of our business, but at the places where we do, we have three sushi restaurants, and a big portion of their business is to go. Man, their supply costs are really hard to get a hold of, and we use it's a nicer to go packaging for that. So we've really struggled with supply costs.
It's interesting. I definitely hear this a lot, like as in that like it's become like the running of like hospitality businesses now is
More complicated.
almost like an extremely complicated P&L challenge, more so than it's ever been before. That like understanding the minutia of like almost like the costs associated with everything, and that's it's almost like there's a demand on laser focus now in a way that before, to your point, like you kind of, if beef went up, you would kind of be able to like, okay, it would just be beef, but it feels like everything is kind of, every kind of line item is at risk now, and it makes like the planning and running so difficult.
Right. So yeah, for the GMs, their jobs have become, it was always a hard job. I think it's become even harder because there are so many more things that they have to pay attention to. And so we have a pretty extensive budgeting process. So, they have to be looking at those budgets almost daily. And like a week like today, where last week we had a cold streak. It doesn't get here. If it's below freezing, it usually doesn't last more than a day or two.
Yeah.
But last week it was down in 5 to 10 degrees for several days in a row. So that impacts sales. People just don't venture out.
Yeah.
Ice storm on Sunday night. That's just now kind of clearing out. So that's an additional thing. So having to be constantly aware of those external forces, what's happening in the weather, how that's going to impact staffing. Do I have to, tell people to not come in? And so, yeah, it's a really hard job, and it's gotten much harder. Margins are just not what they were. And I think any operator is going to have that same reaction, to say it's just everything's gone up so much.
Yeah. I mean, and I guess to that exact point, like we were saying, like say health insurance is not inexpensive, but at the same time, I suppose the value out of that is that it keeps your employees kind of, I don't want to say content, because it's not like they're content to have it, but like in terms of like your churn or your retention of people, like that obviously is a huge opportunity for everybody who works there, like to be able to get it. Because as you say, it's so expensive otherwise to kind of go without. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's part of the competition for sort of benefits that like I definitely hear across the board now is that people are leaning into like more and more health insurance things like you guys are. I know you're saying you were doing it beforehand, but like, I've heard it like restaurant groups say they're rolling it out across all of like, you just have to work there for 1 month and you get the full access and stuff like that. Or, like 401ks and matching and all these kinds of things. Like I'm hearing this from a lot of people. And it's like
part of for us is the idea that this isn't just a short-term job. We view this as a career. And if you want people to treat it like a career, then you have to say, what do other industries do? They offer health insurance, they offer 401ks, they offer access to mental health, So and it comes at a cost, but I think ultimately it's beneficial because I think it helps with the retaining the employees, the good ones, and the ones who understand that, I over the years, I got so many notes from employees, thanking our executive team for giving them access to it because it helped them a lot.
I would say I would agree with you. I mean, like at the end of the day, like one of the, like definitely what I hear is like the like sort of like battle for quality employees now is like so hot, like finding, and so really the onus is like on the retention side of it as opposed to discovering those sort of diamonds in the rough, because it's so hard and everybody's competing for that person, that if you have that person already or have a form of that person, that it's like trying to like keep them, and to your point, making them aware that like there's a career here for them. I think like, and definitely the fact that you're saying that and able to articulate that, like I definitely feel like what cuts the difference between companies that are like yourselves, like very successful and growing in lots of locations, versus those that don't, is really an emphasis on like making the people kind of better. Because like, I had somebody on the podcast recently and they do like arcades and food and they're like 200 locations. And he's like, there's nothing patentable about what we offer. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like it's like arcade food, anybody can create it. But he's like, the difference was we kept the vast majority of our company through COVID. And I think that reflects well on sort of the employee brand. And it's like we offer the route for them to move up in their career. Because the guy I was speaking to was started as a bar like a bartender in that place and now is like an operations expert, And so it's kind of interesting that you say the same thing, because it's like, yeah, like you want to help people kind of fulfill that and move them on.
Yeah, that's what I hear from customers a lot is when they go into our locations, they're very happy to see the same faces.
Yeah.
Because that's, it's just comforting to know that you're going to go in and see the same bartender or the same manager or the same general manager. And obviously that helps with every aspect of what we do, that in terms of food quality, in terms of customer service, having the same people there because they understand how it works. So yeah, retaining those employees is a huge part of what we do. And one of the things when we have every 8 weeks or so, we have a new employee meeting. We call it McNellie's Group 101, just kind of an introduction to the company. And one of the things I always talk about, we have a few employees who started with us as we have a woman named Ann. She started with us as a host when she was 16. 11 years later, she's a general manager of one of our high-end restaurants. So she discovered pretty young that she had, liked being in this industry, and we found a way to keep her within the company and constantly promote her. We have another woman who started as she was a server, just working a few lunch shifts at a restaurant that was new at the time. And early on, we realized, man, she's very good at what she does. And she had this kind of intangible customer service gene somehow. It wasn't because she had grown up eating at a bunch of restaurants. She just knew it. She understood customer service and how to interact with customers. So I want to say at the time she was 20, and now, 12 years later, 13 years later, she oversees 4 restaurants for us. And
that's amazing.
As a partner in the company, and has equity. So that's one thing I try to communicate to people is if you want to make this a career, we have opportunities for advancement. Or if you just want to come and work a few lunch shifts, that's great too. You don't have to, having that flexibility depending on what stage people are in their lives. We have some moms who want to work, during the middle part of the day because of where they are in their lives and how old their kids are. So being able to offer that flexibility, I think, is helpful too.
Do you think, you mentioned like that certain intangible, and I'm so happy you said that, because I whenever that kind of comes up, I love like kind of understanding how you think about that, because like to your exact point, like everyone, they like the French call it like je ne sais quoi, like what is that sort of like, like I had somebody on recently and they were like, look, we can teach service. Like anybody can be taught like service, but like to your point about that intangible, what is it that is that genetic disposition to make somebody so great at hospitality,
I have a theory that if someone could, do like a equivalent of like a Myers-Briggs for customer service and understand what those, emotional, and I think it's a form of emotional intelligence that some people just have. They can immediately look at someone and know up they're happy or up they're upset or up they need help, and they can navigate challenging situations with people with ease, and somehow they just understand it. And sometimes you see some employees like you can walk into a restaurant and immediately know it's not going well, and you look at the manager and go, how do they not see that it's burning down, oh, it's fine. Like, I don't know if it is. So yeah, if someone could do that, they could make a lot of money to being able to give some kind of personality test to say that person's got this magical customer service gene that will make them really good at their jobs. But I've yet to discover it, but maybe through this.
You're not, I'll tell you this, you're not alone.
When they have it, obviously we go out our way to make sure we keep those people up to and including, having equity in the company.
Yeah.
So now the woman I talked about, she's very obviously invested long-term in ensuring that we succeed because she has a stake in what we do.
Totally. And that's amazing that you offer that sort of like, I guess it's a benefit, in inverted commas, because it's like, I guess if you start the job, you have an opportunity to get equity in the business. But to that exact point, like these diamonds in the rough are so hard to find. So when you find one of them, it's like, how do you hold on to it? And like those opportunities to like move up in the business. I, honest to God, like every single person who has been on this podcast and every single person who's been on it is successful says that. Like if you can give them the opportunities for growth in the organization, no one's going to leave as a GM. Like a great GM is not going to leave for another $5,000 to go somewhere else. Like
Right.
if they have the opportunity to grow in a business, like they're going to jump ship if it's just like not good.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
we hear that a lot from people who
Yeah.
come to join us. Is we'd never poach anybody from another company, but if someone were to approach us, and often what we hear is, why do that restaurant's doing well? Why do you want to come over? And it's often, I want additional opportunities.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been able to do, is continue to grow. And in the past year, we've opened. Let me think about this.
I was just going to ask you.
We've opened 4 new restaurants within about 14 to 16 months, and those are challenging. Opening is not easy, and especially because we haven't replicated a lot of brands. We've tended to do new brands.
Yeah, I see that.
And then we're going to find a few that we're ideally going to grow with in the future, but we're kind of just trying to, one restaurant at a time, make Tulsa and Oklahoma City and Little Rock more interesting places to live by offering amenities that weren't there before to customers.
Yeah, no, that's unbelievable. That's unreal. And I mean, like, it is kind of like amazing how, to that exact point as well, you're saying like they're not exactly replicable. Like they're all very different in what they are. So you're essentially launching a new brand from like the get-go every single time.
Right.
Like when you think of like new store openings, new restaurant openings, or new bar openings, whatever phrase you want to use. I use NSO. I seem to think that's like the phrase. When you think about that, like for you, like what is the biggest challenge of those? Is it like getting like the marketing to people to know that it exists, right? Is it like, getting staff in? You mentioned like getting staff like in 2021 for new stores was like very challenging. Is like, because presumably it's the same supplier of food. So like, I'd imagine in that sense, like, the kind of food kind of thing.
Well,
like,
our most recent openings, it's actually a joint location. It's part neighborhood pub, and the other part of it is an all-day bistro. So they share a kitchen. Out on the sidewalk, they are 2 separate restaurants to the customer, but they are actually connected in the back.
Yeah.
So one at the pub is a neighborhood pub with maybe 50 to 60, 70 seats in it. It's tiny.
Which pub is that now? Which one is it?
It's called Bishop Quigley.
Bishop Quigley.
We opened that right around Christmas. That was relatively easy for us because we have 3 pubs that we've already done.
Yeah.
So that wasn't particularly stressful. Also had a small menu with fish and chips, a burger, a ham and cheese toasty, a soup. So that was not particularly stressful. And we could bring in employees from some of the pubs to help out. The neighboring, I call it the sister restaurant, Maple Ridge Grocer, on All Day Bistro, that was a lot more challenging because it was first of all, an all-day restaurant, so breakfast through dinner.
Oh yeah.
So just anytime you're trying to do multiple day parts, it's just more challenging, right? And
totally.
So that's now, that particular one's, it's 3rd week of business, and I equate it to like, we have an opening team there. That's like the metaphor I have is it's like getting an airplane up to cruising altitude, So I'd say at this point, the team over there is like at 25,000 feet. They're trying to get to 35,000.
Yeah, 10 more to go.
Pilot. But it's just that's it's new menu items that they're cooking, so that can be hard.
Yeah.
The marketing now it's probably more challenging than it was historically because so much of it's done digitally, but the digital stuff, no one can really understand it. I mean, everyone says, like, when you talk to anyone in digital marketing space, they've got it figured out, and you run an ad and they say it works really, really well. But I look at the metrics, I'm like, I can't make sense of these metrics, but they're like, oh, it's a huge hit. You got to trust us. So,
well, as somebody who does this for a living, I can certainly have a chat with you offline about that and give you some real talk. But like, I totally get it. And I mean, like, but some brands do very well out of it. Like, I mean, like we've had like, well, the very first episode of the podcast we did was a company called Dave's Hot Chicken. And those kids were kids. I mean, they're in their 20s, but they were in LA, and they had like a line around the block, and they just went super viral on TikTok very frequently. And now all of a sudden they're 115 plus locations in like 2 years. I mean, it's
That's
unbelievable.
great. That kind of
Yeah.
growth, hard to comprehend.
It's unbelievable. And I mean, we've got more power to them, but like, I think, you know, it's interesting. I think when it comes to like, to your exact point, like the marketing, but it's like, it's so difficult. And it's like, what's like almost like the ground game for it? You know, I mean, obviously I could go off on an entire tangent with you on this, like separate to like everybody wanting to listen to you as opposed to me.
When I first started, it was much more, 2008, 2009, even into 2010, it was much more traditional advertising. There were a few publications in town that we would advertise through. The newspaper that was a big part of it at the time, plus some smaller kind of, what's called it was a free weekly that kind of was circulating around. Facebook was just kind of coming on.
Facebook pages.
Facebook obviously has changed significantly over the years, and now Instagram's probably a bigger part of what we do. But the marketing, I talked to guys who are 20 years older than myself, and they said when they opened restaurants in the 80s, it was just so much easier than now in terms of marketing. They would just, if you had a good product and a decent location, you could pretty much guarantee your success.
Yeah. But you know what's funny? I heard an interview. I heard somebody talk about even in music, like some like Radiohead, for example. It's like, could you imagine them being on TikTok when they were like up and coming? It's like, no. It's like, obviously they would be. Do you know what I mean? So it's just like how that kind of stuff has kind of changed.
Yeah. So we delved into TikTok a little bit, and I feel like that's so out of my element, but we have to understand that a lot of people, a lot of our audience is using TikTok. Yeah. So that's a challenge, definitely. So if I have some of my, my social media team involved in that, and they keep me, I try to understand all aspects of it, but I have to know that when I'm in over my head, and sometimes I feel like in that space, it can be very hard to feel like you're on top of it and understand all of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I got bags under my eyes, because I constantly have to figure out all this stuff every day, and people have to ask me about it. But do you know what I will say, Jim, as well, like, as my parting last word, because we're coming up on time here, because I know we're over time, is that the pint of Guinness on your website looks fantastic. And let me tell you.
I can guarantee you, we definitely pour a really good pint of Guinness. I'll just give you quickly, the company came about because my business partner went to Notre Dame, studied abroad in Dublin, fell in love with pub culture, decided to come back and do a business plan for opening a pub in his hometown. And because he was like, why is the downtown not have a better pub? And that was the genesis of the company. So pouring a good pint is kind of one of a very important thing for us, especially if you're bartenders at any of our pubs, to make sure you pour a proper pint.
Well, I'll tell you what, I will go out of my way to come and either watch OKC, the Thunder, even though I don't like them as a team, but I want to see, who's the coach of the team again? I was going to say,
oh, shoot, I can't think of his name. It's not Popovich. Popovich is
another guy who's been there for a while, isn't it?
He's been there. I can't think of his name. But yeah, having a good season, so that's nice. It's good for our place in Oklahoma City.
But I was like, I'll finagle any reason, any excuse to come and try out a pint of Guinness over there, because I have the highways and byways of American pints of Guinness. Let me tell you.
I'm sure you've met some ones that we're not
far between.
No, we go out of our way to ensure. I imagine we'd probably, in the state of Oklahoma, I don't think anyone pours more Guinness than we do. So it's always fresh.
That's a hat tip, I'll tell you that much. Well, Jim, thanks so much.